most important thing about being Jewish. The door-by-door being part of a rich tradition, the focus on behavior and treating others well, the sense of responsibility toward others, the food, the culture, the music, the history, the sense of peoplehood. What is the most important part of being Jewish? Well, I think we would agree this is basically an impossible question to answer. We could never agree on the essential elements of Judaism, or could we? Since I was a child, the most important element of being Jewish was its focus on doing the right thing, on justice and what is fair. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, chapter 16, verse 20, we find one of the most important quotes from our Torah. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. This quote, along with the ethical principles found in our Torah and Tanakh, provide the primary basis for Western law and societal norms. The ideals of justice, mercy, and due process particularly come directly from the Jewish legal tradition. Judaism is about doing the right thing. It is not about being kosher. It is not about following archaic laws. It is not about a 16th century version of Judaism that we practiced in Poland. It is about being relevant. And if we are not making the world a better place and bringing meaning into our lives and creating an equitable society, then it is irrelevant. And when I think of justice in today's world, I'm sure you'd agree, these are very sad times. There are so many issues that I could speak of right now, but I only will pick 143. I'll do 3. The first one is something that our congregation, our fellow congregations in Silicon Valley have been working on together for well over a year, and that is responding to the needs of our veterans of life. The greatest issue besides health care and the right to die is transportation for our elders. We are a commuter generation, and our transportation systems in Silicon Valley are not geared toward our aging population. We must do something about that. A major aspect of our Tikkun Olam activity focuses on this very issue. But if we each commit to helping one of our fellow members come to services or to adult education or to a social activity, we could affect change in our synagogue. But there's another rationale for us as well. God willing, we are all getting older. We are all aging, if we like it or not. How we treat those that are aged now should be our expectation on how we will be treated. When we help someone who's older, how does that feel? I, for one, think it is an honor, but I'm cognizant that I'm not far off from needing help myself. None of us really are. So it is in our best interest to create infrastructure now that will help our veterans of life, because by doing so, we will be the beneficiaries later on. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel reminds us, the test of a people is how it behaves toward the old. And so far, we have failed that test. It continues to be a shanda, how we treat our elders. It is hard enough that as we age, our body lets us down. It is hard enough that we have to slowly, if we are lucky, give up our freedoms. And from a Californian perspective, since we do not have a great rapid transit system, we are dependent on our cars. And then as we age, we must give up that privilege, that sign of independence and freedom. The result is that we are slowly but surely isolating seniors in our society. And as we said last year in our Tikkun Olam committee, we'll discuss again this year at our Tikkun Olam discussion, we as a congregation have an obligation to fight senior isolationism. Now, I gave a suggestion last year of how we could ease senior isolationism. I think one option that could be a loving and responsible action we could take is to make sure that every veteran life has a way to get from one place to another. And yes, that includes getting, going to the store and doing errands, those kinds of things, basic needs. I can't think of actually a better way to ensure that you attend Shabbat services monthly, if not more often than to commit to taking one of our veterans of life to and fro a service. Like I've said before, be a schlepper before you need to be schlepped. When we think of tzedek, justice, we also think of tzedakah, which is the act of righteousness, and a mitzvah, which is an obligation. That means doing tzedakah is not necessarily a nice thing when we get it done, but rather it is a commandment. It is something that we should feel obligated accomplish. Personally, I have a hard time dealing with the growing economic disparity we have in our society. Our middle class is nearly gone, while the amount of poor and wealthy are growing. And those that suffer from lack of food or not knowing where their next meal is coming from is gaining numbers. These are not trends we should be seeing in 2014. Homelessness, poverty, hunger are not acceptable issues, and until we rid Silicon Valley of these societal ills, we should not stop pushing on these issues. This is not just about politics. This is about doing what is just and right. So the first two issues, senior isolationism and economic disparity, are not Jewish specific, but they are affecting everyone who lives in our beloved city. The third issue I bring up on this topic of justice is something that is somewhat Jewish specific, but it has implications for all people. And that is that anti-Semitism is rising. In fact, a newer anti-Semitism has been created as seen in the anti-Israel sentiment that is increasing. We especially see this on the college and university campuses by professors and teachers who feel they have the right to spread this anti-Semitism by hiding under criticism of Israel. So too, we have many fellow Jews who are adding to the problem, talking out of their tuchus, with little knowledge of what is really going on. The college campus is a battlefield for our young. As Tammy Benjamin, a professor at UC Santa Cruz, meeting with our Israel Political Action Committee, explained to us, she in fact started an organization called Amcha to help fellow Jews on campus combat anti-Semitism. And we connected with her as she was combating a UC Berkeley professor, Dr. Hatem Batzian, a lecturer in Near Eastern Studies, who posted on his Facebook page an announcement of an International Day of Action on college campuses. Free Palestine and end the siege on Gaza, which was to take place on September 23rd. The posting includes the following message: a call for activists and organizations on campuses across the world to organize massive protests on every college and university campus. Make Free Palestine and ending the siege on Gaza part of campus education by holding teach-ins, rallies, sit-ins, civil disobedience. No to academic complicity with Israeli occupation. No to study abroad programs in Israel. No investing in apartheid and occupation supporting companies. No to university presidents' visits to Israel. No campus police training or cooperation with Israeli security. No joint research or conferences with Israeli institutions. No cooperation with Hezbollah networks on college campuses. No to targeting faculty for speaking against Israeli crimes. No to administrative limits on free speech, rights of Palestinian activists. No to university coordination and strategizing with the ADL, JCRC, AJC, Stand With Us, ZOA, Israeli Consulate to limit students' pro-Palestine constitutional protected activities. Free Palestine, end the siege of Gaza, and build the movement on your campus. In response to this evil speech, Tammy Benjamin wrote the following to the Chancellor of UC Berkeley. I quote her: "We are deeply concerned about the safety and well-being of Jewish students around these events. In the wake of Israel-Gaza conflict, global anti-Semitism has reached levels not seen since the Holocaust. Jews throughout the world are being targeted for threats, physical assaults, and murder, and Jewish property for desecration and destruction. While we fully support academic freedom and students' freedom of expression, these types of demonstrations can result in anti-Semitic rhetoric and violent behavior, creating a hostile and unsafe environment for Jewish students. Just days ago, a Jewish student at Temple University was punched in the face and called baby killer, racist, Zionist pig, and kike, as he stood next to a table run by the Students for Justice and Peace, SJP. As you may be aware, the UC Berkeley SJP group, which was in fact founded by Dr. Bazian himself when he was a graduate student in '01, has a long history of engaging in anti-Semitic behaviors, targeting Jewish and pro-Israel students for harassment, intimidation, bullying, and even assault. Dr. Bazian's call for students to engage in aggressive and potentially illegal actions against Israel and its campus supporters, actions that include civil disobedience, can only exacerbate the already hostile environment for pro-Israel Jewish students and create the conditions that could well lead to violence on campus. Moreover, Professor Bazian is promoting an academic boycott of Israel, which calls for shutting down opportunities for students to study in Israel and severing all ties with Israeli universities and scholars. A boycott which more than 250 university presidents, including yourself, have called a subversion of academic freedom, and which has been decried as anti-Semitic by government officials and Jewish leaders. Furthermore, we believe that it is highly inappropriate for Dr. Bazian, a faculty member at UC Berkeley, to incite students to engage in civil disobedience. Behavior which is potentially legal and may lead to adverse consequences for the students and others. We wanted to bring this to your attention immediately so you could monitor the behavior of SJP and other student organizations involved in the September 23rd Day of Action and ensure, through the use of campus police and administrative oversight, that behavior which violates university policy or the law will be swiftly and appropriately addressed, and that Jewish and pro-Israel students will not be harassed, intimidated, bullied, or assaulted. Unquote. Talk about being on the front lines. That is what Jewish students are having to deal with throughout universities and colleges, college campuses in our beloved United States. Another professor does give an interesting point of view as he says, Israel does not demand, nor does it depend on, the total moral clarity and coherence of all its actions. If anything, true moral clarity requires a meaningful blending of loyalty to self and empathy to others. Conditioning ourselves to be discerning moral thinkers and actors in an atmosphere of moral complexity, while remaining loyal to our people of the state of Israel, is not a betrayal of Israel. These advocacy efforts based on a curated set of facts also undermine the best professionals and educators that we as a Jewish community have in place to do the critical work of student engagement on campus. Our colleagues working at Hillels around the country are talented, and they are driven to do their work by a passion for the big questions of identity, belonging, and meaning. They do not go into Jewish education to win a Kafka-esque color war, mapped onto complex geopolitical realities. They went into this line of work to shape lives and help inform life decisions. He makes the following statement as well. I am saddened that we are making cheerleaders out of people who we need to be coaches. Out of the fear of the threats of delegitimization, demonization, and double standards, we are building a system through which we demoralize, destabilize, and diminish the very leaders we need our campus colleagues to be. While I understand the value of Israel advocacy and frameworks that demand advocacy, and while I see the appeal of the advocacy approach to concerned parents in reassuring them that we have facts as ammunition to combat those who oppose us, the notion that college students crave concise clarity when it comes to complex issues, especially those students without strong enough roots to believe that their side has a credibility advantage, misreads how young adult development works and barters the credibility that comes with taking people seriously in exchange for the desire for lockstep loyalty. It makes Hillel a place of retreat for safety rather than a place to grow, and turns educators into gatekeepers. If the universities and colleges are safe for our Jewish students, they are very well able to be critical thinkers, to look at all sides of an issue and to be thoughtful. But when there's anti-Semitism coming down on them, they can't function that way. They have to fight for their right just to exist. That's not what should be happening in our country. I'm going to say that. This issue of college campuses is something that we all need really to be engaged in. And it is in our backyard. San Jose State has at least one professor who continues to spread evil speech toward Israel, as many of us witnessed his attempt at hijacking a pro-Michael Brown rally into a statement towards support of the Palestinians, and that just happened a few weeks ago. It was really awful, actually. We must be engaged in what is happening in Israel. For example, the World Zionist Organization's elections are coming up, and we need to make sure liberal Judaism is well represented in our spiritual homeland. You'll hear more about this over the next few weeks. Tirdof, the last word of Tzedek, Tirdof in the book of Deuteronomy means, shall you pursue. Pursuing justice is not a lovely idea. It is a commandment, an obligation of the highest order. For justice for one or for one group is not justice, but justice for all peoples is true justice. There's so much that we must be doing that our Tikkun Olam committee has divided itself, not in 1, 2, 3, but 4 subcommittees. On Rosh Hashanah, you heard about our Israel Political Action Committee. And if the issue of how Israel is viewed and what is happening on the college campuses is of interest, that is the committee you want to be on, or at least work with. We will have a social action group that will be involved with activities to plan and carry out the mitzvot and charitable actions that directly help and assist the needy members of our community, such as food drives, winter clothing collections, and other programs that provide personal help to the hungry and homeless. The third aspect of our Tikkun Olam committee will focus on Mitzvah Day during the MLK weekend this January. The fourth aspect is what our Tikkun Olam committee has been focused on as a member of ACT, People Acting in Community Together, and that is social justice activities that address larger issues related to the root causes in our society that lead to the need for charity and assistance. By trying to change the political environment that fosters disadvantages within our community. This committee will go by the name of Tzedek, based on the quote that we have just read from Deuteronomy. By refocusing our Tikkun Olam energy into these 4 groups, we hope to accomplish a great deal more. I hope each of you will get involved with at least one part of our total Tikkun Olam program. Maybe work on Mitzvah Day, or work on community-based projects like a homeless shelter, or focus on the Tirdof element by the work we do with PACT, or help our Israel Political Action Committee that will be focusing on supporting Israel. Either way, stop whining, stop fetching, get involved. We need to repair the brokenness of our world, one step at a time. And it's not on someone else to do that. That's our responsibility. Can you imagine what we could accomplish if we each did one more thing this year than we did last year? For true repentance is not just with our words to one another. It is in our actions toward ourselves, our loved ones, and toward maybe more than anyone else, the stranger in our midst. I am Jewish because I believe that Judaism's focus on making the world a better place is what is most important. Join me, join our Tikkun Olam committees, and I look forward to hearing your comments in a few moments at our sermon discussion. Just so you know, all sermons I've said are up for talking.